Welcome to House Education. This is January 27th. Today, we're going to start what will hopefully be a regular visit from the leadership at the State Board of Education. The idea being kind of keeping an eye on what they're up to at their level, how it might sort of reflect back on what we need to be doing, and just to sort of get an idea where both are at. And I'll just say, we're going to have them in generally the day after they hold their monthly meeting. Meanwhile, the State Board has also created a sort of legislative committee that they invite me to as well to talk about what we are up to. So hopefully keep those close connections during the session. Anyway, welcome to you both. The floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Jennifer Deck Samuelson, Chair of the State Board of Ed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you again. Tammy Colby, Vice Chair, State Board of Ed.
So, and Tammy and I don't have anything prepared for you. We figured that this would just be an open conversation. And when Representative Conlon had first suggested this idea of a regular check-in, it seems like a great idea because, as you guys are well aware, State Board of Ed is basically a volunteer organization. And so this seemed like a good way to keep us in the loop and apprised of what's going on during the legislative session. Because otherwise it's kind of hard for us to know what's going on unless someone tells us. So this seemed like a good sort of regular check-in opportunity. So I thought that was a great idea. And thank you, Representative Conlon, for suggesting that. The other thing too that I had mentioned, which I'll just throw out to the whole committee, is State Board of Ed meets the third Wednesday of every month. And so I thought it would be helpful, first of all, to schedule our meetings with House Ed after that meeting so that we can report back on anything that the State Board has done that might be of interest to this committee, but also to allow you guys, if you have questions that are coming up, that you would like some input specifically from the State Board of Ed, if you let us know prior to the third Wednesday of the month, then it's really easy for me to add something to the agenda and have a conversation with the full board and then be able to report back to you. It's happened in the past where sometimes like I've been asked to testify on something that has not been discussed with the State Board of Ed, which really leaves me in two positions. Either I can, basically say, haven't had a chance to talk about it. This is what I personally might think, and be very clear about that, or warn a special meeting of the full State Board of Ed so that we can provide you with the board's position on an issue, which I think would be really, really helpful. So just want to put that out there, but thank you all.
I think what might be helpful is an update concerning, sort of we appropriated a bunch of money for you all to start moving down the path of weeding through all of your responsibilities and all of the things you need to sort of catch up on or clean up on. Maybe an update how that process is moving along.
Sure. And actually, maybe next time we come, I can have Sarah Buxton join us because I think that would be really helpful, just so that the committee has a better understanding of where she is in the process. I do know that, so let me back up. The General Assembly appropriated, I believe, the sum of $200,000 to the State Board of Ed, both to provide support to the board when legal services are needed, to support us with our rulemaking, but also to really go through this review of our rules, many of which have not been updated for well over a decade. So, we received those funds, and in fact, we still had some money left over from last year's budget that I was able to fold into that amount for legal counsel. We did advertise the position and ultimately selected Sarah Buxton, with whom I'm sure many of you are familiar. She's helped the board in the past. Most recently, she helped us update both EQS Rule Series 2000 as well as our independent school approval rules, which is Rule Series 2200. She had also been, I believe, a House Ed committee member a decade ago. So she comes at it with a good understanding and was really able to, jump in and help the board. So we've asked her to help us with this. I do know that she's going through the rule series and is preparing something to be discussed with the board, but we've not yet had that discussion because I think she's still going through her review and formulating her recommendations before she would bring that to the board. So that's where she is. I know that she's also helped us, periodically as issues have come up, and my intent is that she will help us with rulemaking. As you all know, we're required under Act 73 to reopen EQS and 2200 again. I expect that Sarah's guidance will be instrumental in making sure that we comply with the act, that we are, the rules are in alignment, one rule series to the other, and that we comply with the law.
Do you have a sense of, are you getting regular sort of accountings from the AOE as to how the approved independent school approval backlog is, where it stands?
So that is a good question. Off the top of my head, I think in the last 6 to 8 months since we've started having schools come before us for reapproval, we've probably looked at a dozen schools. Would you agree with that, Tammy? Plus or minus?
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair estimate. I don't know that we've had a specific update from them on the backlog recently. But I think part of that is just because of the timing of when the moratorium was put in and things along those lines. So,
and I do know that they, in terms of, and my recollection is that there were like 60 some odd schools that were in that backlog. So, call it a dozen have been addressed, plus or minus. In terms of the order of priority, I believe that the agency is prioritizing therapeutic independent schools, as well as the 18 independent schools that remain eligible for public tuition funds going forward in light of the changes that came through with Act 73, and then kind of filling in from there. But they're prioritizing the schools that will have a continuing tuitioning relationship. And
yeah,
not
the
just,
state board
students
worked with
grandfathered.
AOE to think through that prioritization. We did that over the summer with them, recognizing that not all, given sort of the transitions to some of the new structure that we have, that not all of these schools needed to have approved, right? We wanted to make sure that the schools that would be continuing on, right, would have priority in the list of those we would see sooner rather than later. So I don't think we have an update from them, and that's certainly a question we can ask them, and I think you see the secretary on a regular basis as well, so we can ask and maybe you can ask.
But I do think it's fair to say that they are chipping away at that list.
Yeah. Thank you. And I guess sort of on that same question, so we now have a bill in front of us. Because we've had this situation, we have the moratorium in place. We have one therapeutic school wanting to purchase another, but that's creating a new LLC and therefore seems to be in violation of the moratorium, which would require legislative action to make an exception for that, sort of as we did for moving from for-profit to nonprofit. I don't know if the state board wants to weigh in on that, or if you have thoughts on it. We haven't taken any testimony other than the bill presentation on it at this point.
Okay, I am aware of that school, and actually, I know that Sarah Buxton is also aware of that school. I think the plan is, she's done some research on the issue. I know that Emily Simmons, on behalf of the agency, has done some research on that issue, and the two of them were going to have a conversation. Really trying to understand, what does constitute a new school? Is it as simple as the school needing a new tax identification number? So it's one of those things where it seemed pretty simple on paper until you started chipping away at it and then realizing that it's actually a little bit more complicated and, wanting to ensure that we're not creating unintended consequences in either direction. So I think Sarah is going to reach out to Emily and see if the two of them have thoughts about it. But I mean, if you want the board to have a position on that, but I think this is really more of a legal analysis. And then it goes back to the legislature and the policy about the moratorium and, what is that policy intended to achieve and whether, what is being proposed fits within that policy decision that's been made.
Yeah, I think to Jennifer's point, if you'd like the state board to weigh in on that, I think we need to be real clear on legislative intent.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that because frankly, it's as everything tends to be, it's more complicated than just that as well, because from my understanding is that if you are an existing independent school or independent therapeutic school and you want to open a whole other campus in a whole other town, that's not a new school. That's just an expansion of the school that you have. And
You're exactly right.
And the state board has approved a school in that instance since
right.
moratorium, right? And so that, back to the point, I think it's important that if you'd like the state board to weigh in on this, I think we would request sort of a statement of legislative intent on this. I think would help guide our discussion.
Understood. All right, that's real good to know. Thank you.
We do our best to, right? Like our goal is to create rules and regulations that stay within statute, right? So we think about implementation within the constraints that statute provide.
Other committee members, that kind of thing. Representative Brady?
On a different topic, can you remind me where the process around new statewide graduation requirements lies? I know AOP put out a lot of draft work, when that process into your work and what that timeline might look like and updates for it.
Tammy?
Thanks for the question, Representative Brandy. So at our last board meeting, we had a sort of a final set of recommendations that came from the AOE. That is now going to come before our committee. We have a standing state board committee that's on standards and these things. It's the same committee that's considering class size minimums as well. And so our intent is to start to take that up here pretty quickly. We have prioritized class size minimums as the most immediate need, given the implementation deadlines and the implications for school district budgets. So over the next 4 to 6 weeks, I think that will be the priority because many districts are having to wrestle with that right now. There's an implementation date of July 1st, 2026 for class size minimums. We are still waiting to see guidance come out of AOE on that. We've been told there may be guidance, but we haven't seen it. But the committee is going to move forward with sort of developing a framework for that and then start rulemaking around that per statute in August. But then right on the heels of that, we will be taking up the graduation requirements. And the intent is to use the same process that we've used in the past with revising the EQS, where we will certainly take what AOE has given us as a starting point, but we will do our own independent work, which consists of testimony from stakeholders around the state, as well as reviewing what other states have used, and of course, sort of its alignment with statute and other policy priorities that are coming out of the legislature.
So just to tack on to that, so the graduation requirements, the deadline by which the State Board of Ed must open up and commence rulemaking is August 1st, 2027.
27, yeah.
So a year and a half from now. Whereas the class size minimums, the state board has been directed to reopen both EQS and 2200 by August 1st, 2026 to update the rules. And in our legislative review committee, to which we invited Representative Conlon last Monday, I believe, we had raised the issue that I just want to make sure everyone else is aware. There's a little bit of a hiccup, which I think was completely unintentional when Act 73 was in its final hours of being passed. But the way Act 73 is written, the class size minimums go into effect this July. But yet, State Board of Ed isn't directed to commence rulemaking until August. So a month after the minimums go into effect is when we start the process, and we're doing pre-work now, but we would officially begin the process of determining what the rules should be to implement that requirement. And of course, it's an 8-month-long process, so those rules wouldn't go into effect until the spring of 2027. And my understanding, based on our meeting that we had with the full state board last Wednesday and in discussions with the agency, this is causing some agita because school districts are creating their budgets now for the 26-27 school year. And so they're basically, apparently the agencies received a lot of inquiries about this. They're not the ones that are conducting the rulemaking, but they are the ones that are sort of interfacing with districts and answering questions and trying to provide some sort of assurance. But it does create a little bit of a conundrum because these rules won't be effective until after the requirement goes into effect.
So yeah, this is a complicated conundrum, especially because people have brought up lots of questions like, if you've got 3 teachers in a classroom, how does that affect class size minimums, or what is a class?
Right, it's not defined.
But so in the meantime, in the absence, just help me out with this legal question, in the absence of rules created by the state board, does the secretary sort of have the power to interpret the rules for the sake of the fact that they are sort of mandatory starting July 1st?
I mean,
Well,
of course, there are no rules.
Well, the secretary also
Right,
came
right.
before the state board and said
Statute.
we are interpreting the implementation of these of the class size minimums at this point as being sort of aspirational, right? And
Yeah.
so that it's in the absence of rules that there is nothing specifically for them to enforce. And so certainly AOE is interested in making sure that people have guidance. And my understanding is they started their own independent process to develop guidance this fall. We were not part of that process, nor were we invited to be part of that process. We've asked multiple times to see the results of that process. We still have not been provided that information. So we are, we're undertaking our own process, and hopefully we'll see something from AOE so we can line things up. But ultimately what the state board promulgates as rule will be what districts have to follow. So back to your question about the graduation requirements, part of the reason that we're taking up the class size minimums first before the grad requirements is we're recognizing that districts are in limbo out there, right? So to Representative Conlon's point, right, like, how do you even do the math, right, on these things? And so what we are hoping to do is get some guidance out to the districts as fast as we can out of the state board that can give some sense of where we think we're headed, what we'll be sort of proposing in rule, right? Even though we still have the entire rule has to go through ICAR and all those things, so that people can start to get clear on this for the purposes of budgeting. And it will have implications, of course, for decisions around school consolidation and things along those lines, right? So we're going to move quickly on that first, and then we'll pick up the graduation requirements right after that.
And I would add 2 things to that as well. One is the agency has said, and I would agree with this, that even though there's this deadline of July 1st where these requirements go into effect, there is an understanding that this is not a bright line, that this is a process, and that schools, the hope is that districts will be moving in that direction, but I don't think they should be worried that bad things are going to happen if they are not in compliance on July 1st, or frankly, even, July 1st of 2027, because I'm remembering, I think it's if a school fails to meet the class size minimums for a 3-year period. So again, I mean, like we've got some time for this to really take effect before the agency would ever come before the board and make any sort of recommendations. I think it would be helpful. I think the agency is providing assurance to districts that this is not a bright line deadline. I think it would be helpful, for the board to also communicate that, as well as, my suggestion is that legislators do as well, because I think there's so much concern and anxiety over, what our schools are doing and what they need to comply with. It would be nice to be able to allay this concern that this isn't something that, like, I wouldn't want schools to start letting staff go to comply with a July 1st deadline when we're really in the very beginning stages of all of this.
Thank you. That's actually really helpful information for all of us to have. Yeah. Representative Harpel.
I just want to put it out there that is already happening.
Yeah.
I know.
Like, people
Good.
have already been given their notice. So I don't know what else we need to do to get that out there, but I know of at least 6 people that have lost their job because of this deadline.
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess, I mean, the law itself is very clear that there's a 3-year,
Right.
and then even then, it's more of a work with. So,
Somehow it's not getting across though, or somewhere the message is being lost, or administrations are using it as a mechanism
that's
to
probably more
do
like.
firings and saying it's not our fault, it's because of this deadline.
Well, if I'm,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
if I may, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but would it be helpful for the General Assembly to push this July 1st deadline out for a year? So that it's clear that, and that would give the State Board of Ed time to update the rules and provide that guidance, but it would maybe help people not panic and think that they need to meet these class size minimums because we're still in process.
So I would just say we'll take that under advisement. I mean, I think it's important to remember that these school superintendents and school boards and principals all have associations that keep them very well up to date on this information. So to sort of plead, we don't understand the law and therefore we're letting people go, I'm not sure if that's a valid thing to say, but your point is very well taken.
So,
Representative Long.
thank you. So this isn't a question, I'm sorry for the state board since we're weighing in on this, but it is important that the state board hears this. It isn't just about staffing levels, it is about building a budget. And, you know, it may be a 3-year process, but we're in year 1, right, of the 3-year process. So it could be cumulative, and boards have to set their budgets a year, you know, essentially in advance. And they got to take this very seriously. And it does have an impact on whether a school may or may not be able to stay open, you know, or may or may not be able to, or should or should not merge with another school. And it's just one unanswered question with deadlines that don't even match. It's all I'm saying. Figure.
While we have you here, so we had Tammy gave an excellent presentation last week on the sparsity and small school stuff. But I think I and maybe probably other members of the committee need a little bit of a reminder as to next steps and especially what would be helpful from the General Assembly.
Sure. So the state board, at your request, went and developed a framework for thinking about how to define by necessity for the purposes of schools that meet the statutory criteria of a small, which is less than 100 students, or located in a sparsely populated area, which is less than 55 persons per square mile. And the framework that we've sort of presented to you is what the committee developed, and then what the state board agreed, sort of unanimously voted, and we passed along to you. I think the next steps in your lap, which is to take those criteria and create a definition. We're happy to partner with you on that if that would be helpful to think through like what a definition might look like. But it certainly is, you know, I think from our perspective, we did our work and we've given you hopefully what is a robust framework and background materials in terms of what other states have done, and how you might think about using multiple criteria rather than just one, especially employing multiple criteria in the context of having sort of these hard and fast cliffs, right? And trying to navigate that. But I do think that this is kind of back in your lap in terms of next steps, and we are certainly happy to partner with you on that and think through like what a definition might look like. You know, we're happy to talk to you about the kind of testimony that we took. There are data that we collected from the agency with regard to driving times and things along those lines. There's that Excel spreadsheet. So we're happy to support you in that. But I think our work sort of at this point is done, and we've handed it back off to you.
Great, thank you very much. I just needed that refresher.
Sorry, not trying to push things back at you, but I think we kind of took it.
No,
I
it's
think we've run with the ball as far as we can right now. Again, we're happy to help you with your decision making now.
That's good. We got plenty more. We're going to talk on you later, but
Okay.
committee members, any other questions for our guests? Great. Thank you for taking the time and look forward to our next. Jennifer, anything else from you?
Well, I was just going to ask if, you know, from the committee's perspective, is there anything that the State Board of Ed needs to be aware of?
So I would say that if you read Pete Hirschfeld's written article about where we are in education transformation, that'll give you a good sense of where we are in the education transformation process, which is thinking a lot and talking a lot.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Good afternoon.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Committee, just want to, well, we got a little time before we come back, talk some more. I just wanted to go over some other issues that have that are sort of us, but have been sort of divided among other committees, other topics that are sort of floating out there. So we saw the big CTE presentation the other day. Commerce has agreed to continue to sort of take the lead there. However, they have asked for, I think this is a very good idea, is if we could have a Commerce Committee liaison who might sit in on their further talks in those instances where it is not joint. I would also, while we're looking for volunteers, we would volunteer Beth and Rob again to be our Appropriations Committee liaisons if they're willing.
Spreadsheet for me, narrative for you.
Sure, it's $100, right? Which is just to say, for our hearing later today, pay close attention because that's what you're going with. So if anybody wants to approach me later about saying, hey, I'm happy to be the liaison with Commerce over the CT stuff, that would be great. The other issue is pre-K. Ways and Means is looking at sort of the weighting and some various. They're running some scenarios to see what the implications are of some things. They're putting some like concepts on the table, but they're just there to run the exercise. So, for example, what if every 4-year-old was counted as one student, otherwise known as giving somebody the weight of 0, but that's because you're not getting an additional weight. So they're kind of running that to see how that would be. They're looking at the JFO report. As they do that, the JFO the report isn't there yet, but they've had a couple of presentations on it. JFO was basically asked to look at the funding for pre-K from the Ed Fund and the funding for childcare and CCFAP from the payroll tax fund that has been created, and see if there's sort of ways of making the system work better and be funded in a way that takes some pressure off the Ed Fund, but also expands pre-K. So they're looking at a lot of this from that sort of weighting and what is the impact of creating a weight for a 4-year-old, for a 3-year-old, and on sort of taxing capacity and all of that. So we're looking at it from the financial end.
Just a quick question, clarify. Is this like a proactive attempt to try to like kind of make things more efficient, or is there like a serious shortfall that they're dealing with?
I'd say that there was a request by some, including me, to look at the concept of can we bifurcate the two systems, because we do pre-K in private settings, we do pre-K in public settings, and bifurcate everything from oversight, but in this case, funding. Saying if it's in a private setting, it comes out of the child care fund. If it's in a public setting, it comes out of the Ed Fund. So JFO is looking at that, finding out, everything is more complicated than we think it is. They're going to present a report once it's complete, which should be very soon. But meanwhile, they're kind of looking at it from what if we do a weight that is more than what it is today, What is that impact on taxing capacity and impact on the ed fund? They're also coming up with a list of policy questions that would be attached to that would be thrown to us or to Human Services. And Human Services is also looking at pre-K in the private setting and sort of what that means today and what that could or should mean in the future. We have a bit of a job that we probably need to take on within all of that is because we talk about providing pre-K for the school day. Who knows what the school day is? There's no definition. Is it 10 hours? Is it 7 hours? So if you are saying we are going to provide, right now we provide 10 hours of pre-K per week. That's easy to define. If we say we're going to provide pre-K for the school day, we have to define school day. And it may be that we just say a school day is whatever the district decides a school day is, which is kind of what we do now. But anyway, that's something that we probably need to start looking at and thinking about. We have, yeah.
Question. Do we have data around school settings where I know 10 hours is what is required for a pre-K program, but schools do more?
That's going to be a question for JFO. Yeah, I just don't
Yeah,
know.
I think we need help. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah, Josh.
Are you asking like, what are districts that do have full day, what have they done?
Yeah, I'm trying to, not what they done, but how many districts offer full day programs, because I think many do.
Yeah. Does that answer
Yes.
which question?
To define what is, full day is,
Yeah,
kind of what's happening now
yep.
in the field.
We're gonna, yeah. It's a piece of information I think we need as we're working.
Would you follow up with JFO, see if they have that info? Great. Then the other issue, which I thought had been put to bed, but it hasn't. It was punted to a study. And that is funding for adult education and literacy. This has been almost exclusively dealt with. We've had a bit of it, but appropriations has largely sort of tried to figure this out. A study was done by the Agency of Administration, it's supposed to be the Agency of Education. I think it comes up with a couple of recommendations. I haven't heard from lobbyists on this. I haven't really heard much of anything. Not quite sure where it stands.
I've heard from my people down in my county, and they're very much interested in changing the language to option one, whatever that is. And instead of reverting back to whatever it has been, there's a much more equitable thing on the table, and they're pushing hard.
Yeah.
I don't know how to.
I don't know if now's the time, but at some point, I guess I need a little bit of a catch up as to where we left things at the end of last session. Because I know there was a compromise that was worked out, and I thought there was a path that was sort of decided upon last year, and I'm not sure what changed.
That's exactly what I
Yes,
thought.
I would like to know,
But I think sort of after it left us and went into the appropriation and the Senate and all of that, it got sort of reverted back to a study to come up with other options. But I think, as I recollect, I think when it left the House, it was basically we're going to use this funding plan that is largely based on how many students you serve. But it looks like it got a big study.
I think there's a study this summer before that. I think there have been multiple.
I've heard from
students.
those in my area as well about the same thing that Rob's been hearing about. And I do have some stuff that they sent, that I went and visited them, and they gave me some documents about what they're looking for.
If nobody, I guess my is sort of like to keep our lane clear. I wouldn't mind appropriations dealing with this because they have been dealing with it. But I will talk with them about it as well. We probably need to at least take some testimony. So those are sort of the other issues that are percolating out there that are, in part being handled by other committees. All right, why don't we take a